Hello and welcome. I am a sucker for licensed games. Doesn't matter if the game has Star Wars or SpongeBob attached to it. If it's a license I like, I'll be tempted to play it. So you can imagine my excitement when I got my hands on Nicktoons Unite for the Nintendo DS. At the time, it starred all of my favorite Nicktoons all in one game, just like LEGO Star Wars 2, and it should have been the same praise and sort of routine that I did with that game. Sing the game's praises, gloss over the various glitches that are within it, and enjoy the game. But weirdly, my younger self was very disappointed with the game and stopped playing it after a couple of days. I was so disappointed in the game that when I was given the opportunity to trade in some of my older titles for Killzone Liberations on the PSP, I thought the 60 cents that I was offered for it was a good value. So then, what did Nicktoons Unite do so wrong that other licensed games like LEGO Star Wars 2 didn't do? Today's video is sponsored by 16-Bit Store. If you're looking for a one-stop shop for a replacement stylus for your Nintendo DS and 3DS systems, why not visit the 16-Bit Store? We've designed and 3D printed our own styluses from the original Nintendo DS all the way to the new Nintendo 3DS. So if you're in the market for a replacement stylus, why not visit the 16-Bit Store today? And if you use offer code 16BitReview on Etsy, you'll get 15% off your order when you buy 2 items or more. Now, to get a good understanding on why I didn't like Nicktoons Unite before, I have to play it again. It's been far too long. And for those who have never seen Nicktoons Unite before on DS, it's a 3D platformer, unlike its top-down console companion. Though, like its console companion, you do have 4 playable Nickelodeon characters: Danny, Jimmy, Timmy, and of course SpongeBob SquarePants, in worlds designed around each of the Nickelodeon shows. You play through each of these shows one at a time, working your way through its various 3D platforming levels until you hit an end boss fight. From a gameplay perspective, it's simple and weirdly well designed, and yet there's just something about playing through the first few levels that I just can't put my fingers on, that I just don't like. But maybe comparing it to other similar licensed games will drag out Nicktoons Unite's flaws. Take for instance LEGO Star Wars 2. Here is another DS licensed game, which as a kid I loved. But what dragged it down was the near endless amounts of bugs with it. Whether it's bugs in the levels or the never-ending graphical glitches that are ever present, it really drags down the experience and makes it very difficult for me to recommend, despite having a fondness for it even today. So, with that mindset, let's see if there's anything wrong with Nicktoons Unite. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but there are no noticeable glitches within the game. Don't get me wrong, the game is janky, or at the bare minimum unpolished, but I never had serious issues with bugs or design faults throughout the entire experience. I never got stuck in a level or wasn't able to complete objectives, as the game just kind of works. Which probably explains why I can easily find faults with Nicktoons Unite, as whatever issues there are with this game, or at least whatever issues I had with this game, isn't obvious, or at least skin deep. But maybe Nicktoons Unite's issue isn't with how the game plays, but rather how the game is played. A similar licensed game on DS, Star Wars The Force Unleashed, was another great playing DS game, but I personally had issues with it because of the game's controls. for some reason, the game's developers threw mandatory touch controls with sliding combinations in order for you to attack and do force powers, which wasn't necessary in other licensed Force Unleashed games, but it was on the DS, which, mind you, dragged down that experience. And looking at Nicktoons Unite, though the controls are traditional for most of the time, there are some really weird force controls here too. Honestly, the game's developers' climax, it feels like they didn't really have a grasp on what they actually wanted to do with the touchscreen. On the one hand, you have the touchscreen to swap characters by dragging them into a position, which, I'm going to be honest, could have just been done with the L and R2 buttons to quickly swap between them. But as well, the touchscreen is also used for a alternative attack or a special attack which drains a meter. By itself is fine, but for some reason you have to hold the touchscreen to utilize it when you have a perfectly usable Y button which could have been mapped to that, which in this game was used to walk, which is completely and utterly useless outside of toying around with figuring out which buttons are there. On top of that, there are some Flash-style mini-games that are tossed in, and, well, to say I dreaded having to go and play another one is not an understatement, but I don't know. I mean, it hurts the experience, but it doesn't drag it down, as it's not asking you to do delicate movements or precise movements. It's just asking you to use the touchscreen as a controller or to play a minigame, which was designed with the touchscreen around it. It's not bad, but it isn't good. It's just there. I can't really say it drags down the overall experience. It hurts it. But it didn't make me value the game at 60 cents. I'm struggling here because for the main components that make up a game, there's nothing inherently wrong with Nicktoons Unite. Gameplay is inoffensive and nothing wrong with it. The soundtrack and the aesthetics of the game look fine and work well. The controls aren't bad. The story is passable. And there's nothing wrong. But there's nothing technically wrong with this. But I still don't like it. It's almost like Scooby-Doo 100 Nights of Fright. It's a game I reviewed a while ago, and the conclusion for that review was there's technically nothing wrong with it, and it's a pretty good Scooby-Doo game, though there are other Scooby-Doo games that just do something about it better. At the time, I couldn't articulate it, but now that I've talked about so many licensed games, there is one component which 100 Nights of Fright doesn't do. It doesn't respect the Scooby-Doo license. In 100 Nights of Fright, the game just reuses Scooby-Doo Monster of the Week characters as generic enemies without a care in the world for how it was actually used in the original cartoons or how it would impact the story. It just throwing these characters out at a whim. And this choice doesn't directly hurt 100 Nights of Fright, but it made it hard for me to like and to replay. And with Nicktoons Unite, I can absolutely see this issue take place here, because this is supposed to be a big platformer starring Nickelodeon's biggest characters. And yet the game really has no focus on the shows. Sure, each level looks and sounds unique to each of its respective characters, but what's in the levels doesn't make sense. This doesn't feel like Casper High. These aren't the things that I would see haunting or roaming around Casper High. And on occasion it works, like the books flying out of the lockers, but in general it doesn't feel right. Bikini Bottom has generic enemies being plastered around, and Dimsdale has secret agents. What? I don't remember secret agents being in Fairly Odd Parents. I'm sure they're there, but not enforced like this, or at least used in this way. The only place that feels right is Retroville, which, being said, there's no other Jimmy Neutron game to compare it with, so that's not really saying much. As a result, the game just comes off as generic, rather than being a celebration of Nickelodeon's characters. I feel Nicktoons Unite would probably work a lot better if it was split into 4 individual games, and Climax was able to go and sort of define each character a little better. It wouldn't be a Nicktoons Unite game, but it would be a lot better of a video game overall if they were allowed to do so. Which now, looking back, I can finally get a better understanding for why my younger self didn't really like Nicktoons Unite for the DS. I had other licensed Nickelodeon games that I could compare it to. And compared to SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom and Fairly Odd Parents Breaking Down Rules, this clearly was not that good of a licensed game that didn't respect its license. Unlike something like LEGO Star Wars 2, which, I mean, yeah, it wasn't as good as the console game, but at the time I didn't have the console game. So the only thing I could compare it to was my actual Legos and the movies, and it did a respectful job getting as close as it could without going too far to the actual license. Which I think is a bit sad, since there is a lot of potential here with the game's engine on the DS. But I just can't look at a game for what it could be, and I have to look at what it is. And Nicktoons Unite isn't that good of a game. It's playable, and at times can be very entertaining. But you need to be fans of these characters and the Nintendo DS and desperate to play anything that's not Nintendo related on it. For the price of the game, it's not offensive, but it is not a title that I can easily recommend. But anyways, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you have yourself a good day, and as always, take care.